Greetings everyone, Relina here, and today I'm going to show you how I create digital arts. So I meant to make this kind of video for a long while, and despite me having uploaded sort of time lapses before, I haven't done voiceovers yet. And so today I'm going to fix it, well, at least try to fix it, because I have no idea how to do voiceovers, and I hope it will be okay. I have to confess, I almost never have a clear idea of my future drawing in my head, so at the maximum it would be something like, "Ooh, I want to draw this guy looking handsome, and he got blood all over his abs, and he's looking seductively at the camera," and so on. So I started off with just randomly scribbling something, and honestly, it looked like boring crap, as if crap might be fun. So I decided to play with 3D references for a little bit. I've tried quite a few apps, but my favorite one is called Posit. So it looks like this. Here you can choose a preferred model, change proportions, and so on. Also, you can choose preset poses, or you can pose your character just how you like it. I'm not sure if there is a limit to the amount of models in one scene, but I've tried to put up to 7 characters at once, and it worked perfectly fine, so I guess it's alright. So after playing with the pose, camera angle and the lighting in the scene, I finally have a better idea of what I'm doing with my life. And I'm making a quick sketch again. Basically, right now I'm jumping back and forth, just looking at my magnificent reference and refining the sketch further. And it's also useful to have a bunch of references from different angles, not only for anatomy, but also for the likeness, if you're aiming for it, of course. In my case, I'm drawing Astarion, and naturally I want him to look like himself. So I use a lot of screenshots from the game. But in the most cases, I neglect this step, and it's bad. It's very bad, believe me. So don't be like me, please. Just use references. It's good for your health. Next thing I usually do, I fill the character with a solid color. I basically just draw along the contour with a solid brush and then fill the space. I have to do it this way because my line art is kind of rough and sketchy, so I need to make sure there won't be any spots missed. I also block out parts of the character that will have a different color or that are on the foreground, because it will help me with shading later. After this, I set all the layers to white color and I lock transparency, thank you. In Procreate you can do it by dragging a layer with 2 fingers, but I don't know, it probably hates me because it doesn't always respond. I'm also adding clip layers that are going to be shadows or additional details. Finally, I begin adding colors to the character. Why I don't just use a fill tool? Well, because I'm a masochist. Because I prefer my flats to have some texture, okay? So I choose one of my favorite texture brushes, set the size to maximum, and just draw all over the whole area. Since I have locked transparency, the color is just going to stay exactly within the space I fill. For other places like this, you can just use lasso tool. Now I'm going to add details to the skin. I set a clipping layer on top of the skin layer to multiply, then choose a color that is slightly more reddish than the skin tone, and begin making some small, delicate strokes around the ears, the eyes, the nose, the lips. Actually, you can kinda experiment with colors here. Like, it doesn't have to be pink. For a certain result, you might need a cold color, like blue or purple, and these colors may also correspond with different skin tones. So, it's a field for experiments here. But since Astarion has a pretty bright pinkish skin color, maybe a bit on the pale side since he's a vampire, pink blush works well for him. I also used this color on the tips of his fingers and for his nipples, naturally. After this, I merged this multiply layer with the skin layer below because I'm trying to be reasonable with the amount of layers I have in the document. And also because my iPad is very old and it can't operate many layers, unfortunately. Then I pick my watercolor brush and add details with white color. I'm detailing fingernails, eyeballs, teeth, and of course I use red for his irises. And moving forward to the step I've been asked about before. My art style has been changing quite a few times, and so did my techniques. But right now I'm preferring to add color to the line art because it creates a softer, more harmonized result. So I take my line art layer, lock transparency on it, and now I can freely recolor my lines to whichever color my heart desires. My heart desires bright red. I also set line art layer to multiply because all the shadows are going to be below and I don't want the line art to end up looking brighter than the rest of the picture. I also only recolor those lines that are inside the main forms, as you can see. I don't touch the contour to keep the contrast between the character and the background. Next, I'm setting up the layers I'll need for the shadows. I have two base color layers here, so each of them gets a few clipping layers on top. For the shadows, I like to use multiply, and usually I need a couple of layers. Plus, I often use screen, add, and overlay in my works. So the order of layers normally looks like this. The base color layer on the bottom, which has a few clipping layers on top, which are a couple of multiply layers for shadows, then a screen layer for reflections, then an add layer for rim light, for example, and an overlay layer on the very top for additional tones. But I'll get more into this a bit later on. And as for the shadows themselves, I start with some sort of occlusion, I guess. Basically, I imagine a source of light somewhere above the scene and draw the shadows accordingly. And after that, I might add another source of light which creates new shadows and new lit areas, and they may overlap with the old ones. Right now, I'm trying to build up some volume using watercolor brush from Max Pack's watercolor brush set for Procreate, which is my favorite brush set, as you can tell. Like, I literally base my current drawing technique around those brushes. So yeah, I just move from part to part, adding little shadows here and there, which also gives the image a bit more details. Then I look at my work and go like, bro, why so blank? Like, it needs atmosphere, a mood, some more color. And that's when I begin to think about the background. Just about time, lol. So in the game it was some sort of shed, I believe, or, well, I'm not sure. Anyways, for the background I decided to simplify some wood logs because I doubt an overly detailed background would complement the image in this case, and also because I'm lazy. And since I'm lazy, I chose the easiest way possible by drawing some colored lines without any sketch and then adding line art on top of it to make it look I actually planned it like this. Usually it works. Now that I'm done with the background, it's time to move forward and do the lights on the character. Also, they need to match the background, so that's what I'm going to do. All I need is a new clipping layer. I set it on multiply, then I take a large airbrush and just slam it all over the entire surface, but gently, so that something like a gradient appears. Then I create an overlay layer and start to mark the areas where the light falls. Naturally, I try to rely on the reference that I have open next to me. And so I gradually work through the bright areas, trying to depict volume so that the character doesn't look flat anymore. It's also very helpful that I painted the arm, the one on the foreground, on a separate layer. This way, it's easier for me to do the shading and to stay within the selected area. There are other ways to simplify the coloring process, but right now for this project I decided to stick with this one. This is all quite a meditative and time-consuming process. I can sit for hours, scribbling something, then erasing it. I also like to have a let's play in the background or something, so I'm not sitting in silence. Honestly, I can't stand silence. It's much more comfortable to do something when there's a stream or a playthrough of a favorite game playing in the background. And how do you like to draw? Do you turn on anything in the background? Maybe you listen to music or watch TV shows? As you can notice, I switch between different types of brushes. Sometimes it's more convenient to use an airbrush for smooth transitions, and other times I take a smaller brush and just smudge the edges of the strokes. Slowly we're moving to the next part, creating a second light source. In theory, I can imagine a situation with a single light source, but in real life, light tends to reflect off objects and kindly creates highlights and glares, allowing our eyes to better understand the volume of the objects they see. Thank you, light, buddy. Artists often like to use a couple of sources of lighting precisely to be able to show volume more beautifully and interestingly. That's why, in this scene, there is presumably a window out of frame from which, presumably, the moon is shining. Or maybe someone off screen is holding a moon lantern, watching the intimate scene between Astarion and Tav, or Dark Urge, depending on your preferences. Right now, I'm working on an add clipping layer, but otherwise the process is no different from what we did earlier with the first light source. Just as meditatively and slowly, we create volume, look at the reference to avoid messing up the shadows, and see what comes out. At this stage, I create an additional multiply layer to make deeper shadows, thereby enhancing the volume, because otherwise the image looks too flat and unsaturated. And here we are, almost at the finish line. Actually, towards the end of each work, some chaos starts happening. That is, I find something I don't like and I desperately try to improve it. And so, in my layers hierarchy, there's usually this story where everything starts out fine and perfectly organized, and then bam, on top of all of this, some mess begins. You'll see that. The thing is, in Procreate, I really miss the ability to apply clipping layers to a folder as a whole. Maybe you're watching this video from the bright future, where they have updated the app and added this feature, but right now I have to suffer and find workarounds. For example, like as you can see here, I need to make a copy of the folder with all the characters' layers, merge everything into one layer, and then use it as a mask. To select all the contents of a layer, I need to press on the layer with 2 fingers and hold. This way I get a perfect selection that I can then use on new layers that I create on top. I want to airbrush some light and dark areas on top of the character, including his line art. Also, I don't want to overlap the background, so I have my selected area, I tap on the other layer and select the mask option. By doing this, I limit the visibility of this layer to the selected area only. Very useful. And finally, as a cherry on top, I decided to tweak some details in the drawing by creating a normal layer on the very top. And a text bubble, of course. Can't go without it. And here's the finished drawing! I hope you like it. I also hope that you enjoyed the video. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is my first video of this kind. Like, I've never tried to comment on my process in such detail before, and I'm not entirely sure how clearly I explained everything. Anyways, I hope it was useful. Comment what you think, friends. And yeah, thank you for your attention and see you next time.